Hello and welcome to Mountain Patriot Homestead. I thought I would take a break from painting this afternoon and put out a video that I had promised after making the video of water pie, because that actual video brought up a lot of conversation and questions about the ingredients used and would they have been available during the Great Depression. So I can't speak from firsthand knowledge, even though I feel that old sometimes. I'm not quite that old, but I believe that I can speak with fairly good authority just from my parents and what they lived through. Now, my daddy was the second oldest of 10 children, and he was 11 years old in 1929 when the Great Depression began. So he lived through the Great Depression. My mama was born in the last year of the Great Depression. So in 1939, she was born, but she was the baby of 10 children in her family. So her parents had already raised up 9 other children, were raising 9 other children through the Great Depression. So she learned all of those lessons from them that they had dealt with during that 10 years of that economic hardship. Now, as far as the ingredients, let me just go back in case you haven't seen the water pie video. And let me tell you right now, yes, I now know, I did not know when I made it, but I know, I've seen, a lot of you pointed out, thank you very much, that I lost an eyelash or hair or something into that pie. I've said this on another one of the videos. I'm the only one that ate that pie. So if that eyelash or whatever got eaten, that was me. But I do want to thank you because my children have now come up with a new Thanksgiving game that we can play called Who's Got the Eyelash? Kind of based loosely on a Mardi Gras with the King's Cake, that for the whoever gets the little figurine out of the King's Cake. So thank y'all. You helped us come up with a new family game for Thanksgiving. But eyelashes are optional in that recipe. Just want to let you know. But in that recipe, the ingredients based on our modern lifestyle is rather simple. It is a cup of sugar. It is 4 tablespoons of flour. It was 5 tablespoons of butter. It was some vanilla, and it was water. Now, what came into question was not the water, because most people assume that there's water available, but the other ingredients that were questioned was how expensive was it for them to make and use those other ingredients that the pie called for, particularly the sugar and vanilla. Well, that's why I just wanted to sit and visit with you, and I even have notes. So I wanted to make sure I didn't screw this up. So, and I don't try, if I'm using notes, I don't fake that, hey, I know all of this off the top of my head. No, I've got notes. And I just wanted to make sure that I do cover everything. The flour that was used in there, first of all, let me back up a little bit. The Depression era affected, it was as much a difference for folks back then as it was here 4 years ago or so when we had the cough going on. And, you know, some people dealt with it very well, you know, continued to work, you know, continued to be able to get everything they needed and went on. Other people were struggling desperately because perhaps they lost their jobs. They had supply chain issues with getting food. Prices fluctuated, mostly fluctuated up, And so some people were definitely struggling to put food on the table, and some people still are. Well, that's a small dose of what happened back then. Some people, I don't think most people weren't flourishing. They weren't just doing, grand things. Some were, but that was ones that were very, very rare. But others were struggling. And the difference, I'll use this saying of, they weren't all in the same boat, because people like to use that phrase, well, we're all in the same boat. No, we're all in different boats in the same flood. And that's the way it was back then. Everybody had their own boat that they were in and were having to deal with this in whatever manner they could. If you lived in an urban area, if you lived in a town where you were not able to grow your own food, where you were not able to, maybe you lost your job and you couldn't afford to buy things, and you didn't have anything to barter with, you didn't have eggs to trade your neighbor for milk, you were seriously hurting. And that's why, again, I can only speak from my parents' and grandparents' standpoint. They were rural folks. They were country folks. My daddy always said they didn't know that there was a Great Depression, because they carried on life just like they had, because things really weren't that different. When you don't have two nickels to rub together to start with, not having money's not that big of a deal. So country folks, I think, were able to get by a lot of times better than the city folks were, because country folks, if they didn't have vanilla, they might have substituted maple syrup or molasses, or if they didn't have sugar, that you had honey. If you grew your own crops, if you grew wheat, you could make flour. And a lot of times people reverted back to old ways and made flour out of other things like oats and acorns, and just they adapted to what was around them. They were hunters, they were foragers, that hunting and gathering thing. So they also knew, I think, how to rely on each other. Neighbors relied on neighbors, and that closest neighbor might have been 2 miles away. But if you had something that you could trade your neighbor for something you needed, and I'm sorry, the air conditioner's kicking on, so you'll hear some background noise. But if you had something that you could trade your neighbor for, and they needed it, it worked out for both of you. And that was a lot of what was going on. And I know especially my daddy's side of the family, well, my daddy and mama's side of the family. My daddy lived in Western Tennessee, not Western Tennessee, Eastern Tennessee, Western North Carolina. They lived right up on the mountain, right up on the ridge. And my mama's family was in East Texas. And where they were at, both families, the families lived there, the extended families, and so you knew everybody, and everybody was able to trade with everybody else. So even if you needed something from, say, the little general store that maybe you went to once a month, if that, a lot of times them little stores were having supply issues themselves, and they would trade for what you may have. If it was, I don't know, corn harvest time, and you had a little bit of extra corn that you could take to the grist mill and get it ground up for cornmeal, and then trade that at the general store for that vanilla that was so expensive, then that's what they did. They learned to adapt to what was around them. Now, again, city folks had it, and I'm not trying to downplay that country folks just had it all, you know, peaches and cream. No, it was hard for them, but it was always hard because I know, again, my family didn't have much on either side. And so, you know, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you that, oh yeah, it was just one big party. No, it wasn't. And but as far as the ingredients that were in that pie, they would have traded, bartered, raised whatever they needed or traded for it. And as far as vanilla, yes, vanilla was expensive. Vanilla still is expensive. But in that recipe, you know, where you see me just pour vanilla in there, it's because I have, you know, when I get the vanilla, I get those, I don't even know what the name of it is, but it's the kind like you get from Mexico that comes in the big Mondo bottles. I get it that way, and I really need to use up that bottle because I think I've had that bottle maybe, it's a wonder it still even has any flavor because I think I've had that bottle maybe 10 years or longer, so I do need to use up that bottle. But they would have been very careful measuring it out. I did not. I just poured it, and I know, you know, some people were just like, oh, that would have been so expensive. Well, they would have been much more careful measuring it out than I did. So when I'm sharing these recipes, they are, and not all the recipes that I share are from, you know, the Great Depression. I just share recipes that I grew up eating the stuff, or, you know, it's recipes that's been handed down to me. But it's things that I grew up eating that I know what they are. But that water pie recipe I wanted to share with you because I just think it's a neat recipe. It's like magic to me, where you put that together and you mix it up and there you go. And folks kept asking about stirring, and I kept telling them, don't stir, don't stir. But, you know, people's just, it don't seem right not to stir stuff. So I think we've had some that stirred and then found out that wasn't a good idea. But again, these recipes that I put out, I try to put them out for your enjoyment and to learn. I put them out, again, these videos, I think I tell you just about every video. These videos I do for my boys. And for everybody else that wants to watch, I'm so glad that you're here. But another question before I get too far off in, you know, roaming away on that little bunny trail I was chasing. I had several ask on that pie recipe, why didn't they just put fruit in it? Why didn't they just make an apple pie? Well, you know, when we go to the grocery store, at least here in the U.S., I don't know how it is, because remember, the Great Depression just didn't affect the United States. A lot of times we want to claim everything as ours. Well, I think it started here, and then, you know, it just kind of spread. Europe was real hard hit in places. Australia was real hard hit in places, or probably, you know, like us, every place to a degree, but when you're talking about stuff like produce and fruit, you have to remember the availability back then wasn't what it is today. Now, they had commercial farmers even back then, but you didn't have the shipping, you didn't have the preservation methods and all of that like we have today. And so, especially during the Depression, when they got ready to fix something, even if you went and bought something from the market, it was going to be things that was seasonal. And apples aren't available every day. I mean, I can go out here right now and my apple trees they're almost ready, but they're not quite ready. So even if I wanted an apple pie today, I could probably go out there and pick apples, but they're not going to be quite ripe. But if I didn't have an apple tree, I wouldn't be picking apples at all, and they wouldn't have been available at the market, because if somebody else didn't have apples to trade at the market, or maybe the person that owned the market had access to an apple tree or whatever, there wouldn't have been apples. And so that brings up another point of preservation. During the Depression, a lot of people were canning. Now think back here about 4 years ago when all the stuff was going on. A lot of people got into canning, and sorry dogs. A lot of people got into canning, and a lot of people started sewing, and they became bread makers. Now, if you want to get cheap canning materials, and you want to get cheap sewing machines, and you want to get cheap bread, bread making supplies, now's the time to do it. Actually, a year or two ago, because once all the excitement passed by, a lot of folks that had got into that decided they didn't want to be into that anymore. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff available. So if you want to try your hand at canning or making bread or that sort of thing, you might look on, Marketplace or Craigslist or any of your little local venues, garage sales, and you can find that kind of stuff, because I think a lot of folks realize that there's a little bit of work involved. And once the supply chain issues at the stores eased up, they're able to get it from stores again. But that was not always an option for those that were living through the Depression era. Even though there was increases in canned goods, the grocers, the markets started seeing an increase in actual canned goods on their shelves. Canned meats became popular. But again, I can only speak for country folks of my family, because I've heard the stories, and I know how I was raised, because I was raised a lot like my parents were, because they carried that over. They had that sense of using up things, making do with whatever you had. And I feel very blessed that I was raised that way, because if I've been through hard times myself as an adult, but I've been able to make it through. I am so blessed now that we've got the place that we have. Y'all, some of y'all may be looking and thinking, that we're, we've got more than what we actually have. But I tell you, we had to work for it. And, there have been times that we have not been in the position that we are today. And we're not rich by any means. But I tell you, if we need food, we know how to get out here, and we know how to get it, and we know how to cook it, and we know how to preserve it. And that's what that's what my ancestors did. I can't speak for y'all's ancestors as to how, I had a lot of people on that video when I said something about our ancestors, and people corrected me about my ancestors didn't do that. Well, you're right. I can't speak with what your ancestors did. So I just, all I can do is speak for mine. Now, what I want to do, and I have been told you do not do this because, they're your competition. I say malarkey, because when I'm sitting and I'm talking to y'all, it's just like if you're here sitting on the porch with me and we're visiting. If I want to recommend another channel for you to watch, then, I'm going to do it, because I don't feel that it's competition, because I feel that we're learning and we're trying to help each other, and that's what I'm trying to do here. But I noticed I had an alert pop up on a YouTube channel that I follow, and I love the channel. And if you like learning about Appalachian history and the ways of Appalachia, then please go and look for Donnie Laws, D-O-N-N-I-E, Laws, L-A-W-S. Look for his channel. He recently, I think just a few days ago, put out one about how the folks of Appalachia made it through the Great Depression, what they ate, the types of foods. And I thought that that was just so timely that he put that out, because where he's from is real close to the neck of the woods that my daddy was from. And so watch him. He will do such a better job in explaining how they actually made it through. And watch some of his other videos too, because he's just amazing. I love his wildlife videos, watching the critters up on his ridge. And so go over there and visit Donnie Laws' channel. And I just think that that's a good channel to follow, because it's wholesome and it does share a lot of good information. All right. Well, I think I have taken enough of your time, and I'm going to get up and get busy. But I just wanted to put this video out because I'd promised you, first of all. But this weekend, I'm going to put out another cooking video. And I believe it's Miss Cheryl. I'm just trying to go off the top of my head with this one. So, but I had promised you that I was going to put out a tea cake recipe, and I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make some tea cakes for you, and because you was wanting that recipe, so I'm gonna put that out, and I'll promise I'll hold the I'm gonna do my best to hold the eyelashes out of that one. I'd like to say I'd promise, but you know, I didn't mean to put the eyelash in the water pie. But you know, anyway, I was the only one to eat it, so I guess if it was my eyelash, nah, oh well. But anyway, I love y'all, and I hope you come back and laugh with me again soon, or laugh at me. I don't care. But I do always love when you come by, and y'all come back again real soon. Talk to you later. Mountain Patriot Homestead signing out.